Okay, so now we're going to take a look at a couple of functions that we can perform on arrays. So the first function we're going to look at is one to add an element at a specified index. Now in the previous part we already looked at how to add elements, but that was always to the end of our array. Now we'll be able to add elements wherever we want in our array. We're also going to look at a function that is going to remove an element at a specified index. So again, we'll choose an index. It could be at the front or the back or in between, and we'll remove it. Okay, so now we've seen a bunch of stuff that we can do with arrays. Let's introduce to you two final different things that we can do with arrays, and then I'll show you how to access different functions that we can use on arrays. Okay, so the first one is going to be an insert at, and we'll provide an index, and the second one is going to be a remove at, and we'll provide an index as well. So first things first, let's create this array. We're just going to call it greetings array, and it's going to be of type string, and we're going to initialize it to have some values to start off with, such as hi, hello, and hey. So pretty classic greetings. We've all seen these before. So we just have an array, greetings array. It contains these values, and they're all strings. Now let's say we want to insert another greeting. So the way we do this is we call the greetings array, and we call dot insert, and it gives us a list of different functions. The first one we want is the first one is the one that we want. So now it's given us this prompt. It's prompted us to enter a new element, and it's prompted us to enter an index that we want to insert at. So the new element I want to insert, let's say, is something like howdy. Okay, let's have something fun. And then it prompts us to give, and don't worry about this error just yet, it prompts us to give an index. So do we want to insert this at the beginning? Let's go ahead and do that. So at index 0. Now be aware that when you insert an element at a specific index, it adds it at the front. So if we were to insert it here, it would add it at the very beginning. So index 0 would be here, index 1 would be just before hello, and so everything then shifts to the right by one index. So because we inserted howdy at index 0, so at the very beginning, this is now at index 1, this is index 2, and index 3. And as you can see, if we expand this window up a little bit, then we get howdy, hi, and hello, and hey now. Okay? And that's because we inserted this element at the very beginning. The way to add the elements that we saw before, like with the append method and the plus equals, that always adds it to the end. This way we can choose exactly where in the array we want to add it. Now the other function is the remove function. So we're going to call greetings array, and we're going to call dot remove, and right here it gives us the prompt, so at a specific index, and it just basically takes the element out at that index. So let's say, and this error is here again just because we haven't finished the function, let's say we want to remove the very last element, which will be at index 3 now, because we added the fourth element. Okay, and as you can see here, it says we're removing the element hey. So if we did something like this, which is out of bounds, then we get this error. Okay, and that makes sense because if the array is only 4 elements long, how can we remove the element at index 6? So this time we want to remove hey, which is at index 3, and we just want to print out greetings array now to see what values it contains and to make sure that everything's working properly. So as you can see, hey is removed, and there we go. Our array no longer contains hey because we removed the element at index 3. Okay, so these have been a couple of useful little functions that you can perform on arrays. If for a complete list of all the functions that you can perform, I suggest you type in your array name, and then you go dot, and then here we go, is this huge list of different functions and different things that we can do with arrays. So we can append arrays, kind of collections to it. We can append elements, we can get distance from, we can get the end index, we can do stuff like remove all, remove the last element, start index, and stuff like that. So there's a ton of different things you can do. It's just a matter of calling the array and then dot, and then figuring out what you want. And the nice thing about Playground and most IDEs is that they will kind of give you this list of different options, so a list of a bunch of different things you can do. So I urge you to go and try that out. Otherwise, this is all the content that I'm going to teach you on arrays. The rest of the stuff is up to you to learn, and I suggest you do because it's kind of fun working with these things and learning new stuff that you can do. Okay, so in this part we looked at a couple of new functions. These were the insert and remove functions. So the insert function tells us to enter an index and an element first and then an index. So this basically says we specify the element and then the index, and the function adds the element that we specified at the index we specified and shifts everything after that element to the right by 1. Okay, and we looked at the remove function, which prompts us to enter an index, and then it removes the element at that index and shifts everything else left. Okay, and then I also showed you how to access all other functions that you could perform on arrays. So I strongly urge you to go and check out some of those other functions. Some really neat stuff. And once you learn all of these functions, it can save you a lot of time because generally speaking, there's kind of a function to do everything. So rather than going through and doing, these kind of mindless tasks 100 times, there's often a function to do it with just a couple of lines of code. Alright, so this is the end of our tutorial on arrays in Swift 3. Again, we were using Playground to develop our code, and I've included source code in all of the files there so that you have that as a reference. So let's just do a brief summary and a recap of what we've learned so far. So we've taken a look at arrays, and basically we declare them as such. We have a variable, then we have the name, so array name. And then we can include the type if we want, so let's say, just put the type in brackets here. And then we initialize it to contain some values, so this is one way to do it, or we can just create the blank array by doing this and doing that. So this would just create a blank array of this type, whereas this one would create an array of this type and we'd have to insert some kind of values there. Okay, so we looked at, I'm just going to put these, so we looked at string arrays. First we focused on Boolean arrays. Then we looked at int arrays. So I guess this was int, float, and double arrays. And then we looked at character and string arrays. And then we looked at stuff like accessing and modifying array elements. And the way we did that was by calling array name and the index, and that was to access it, and then to modify, giving the element a new value. Okay, so I don't want that. So these arrays were all kind of initialized in the same way, so we just enter in a bunch of values, so we could have, value 1, value 2, etc. Okay? Just going to put the C there. And then we looked at how to insert elements, or how to add elements at the end of an array. And that was by the plus equals method. So we have an array here plus equals another array, and then that just adds, basically it says this first array here is whatever it contained before plus this one, or we could even do something like array 1 plus array 2. Okay, and that just adds two arrays together. We also looked at how to do this using the or using the array.append method, and that just added one element at a time to the end of an array. Okay, in the last part we also looked at how to initialize arrays containing all the same value by calling the array and then the repeat and then the value, or repeating and then the value that we want, and then the count, and then the number of times to repeat. Okay, and then the last thing we looked at was how the insert and remove functions work. And basically they just kind of prompt us, so they prompt us to specify an element to add, obviously just for the insert function, and an index. So the remove function removed the element at the index we specify, whereas the add function added the element that we specify and at the index that we specify, and kind of shifts everything left or right as appropriate. Okay, so the last thing I showed you was how to search for new functions to perform on these arrays. So again, I highly recommend you do that. Otherwise, this is a brief summary of what we covered so far in our array tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please leave some kind of feedback, and we'll be doing other tutorials on stuff like for loops and functions. If you haven't watched our tutorials on variables and if statements, I strongly recommend you do that too, because those are two very important concepts to get down. Otherwise, thanks again for watching. Really appreciate the support, guys, and otherwise have a great day. Hopefully we will see you next tutorial.